What if the engine you trusted was built to fail on purpose? Internal documents from Harley's Twin Cam 88 program reveal cost cuts that turn durability tests into corporate roulette. If you own one, the damage could already be inside your crankcase. This isn't rumor. It's in the factory data, the memos, the numbers. Watch till the end, because I'll show how to spot the hidden wear and the $600 upgrade that can save a $6,000 rebuild. The leak and the legend. Harley-Davidson made a choice, and it wasn't you. That line ripped through every rider's forum the night the leaked files appeared. Buried inside were 2 decades of emails, test logs, and cost analyses that peeled back the chrome on America's proudest motorcycle brand. What riders found was not a story of progress. It was a story of corners cut, warnings ignored, and loyalty sold off a spreadsheet. For years, the Twin Cam 88 had been the beating heart of Harley's identity. Launched in 1999, it was billed as evolution, stronger, smoother, built for the next century. The marketing promised thunder forged in honesty. The memos showed something else entirely. Engineers had flagged internal wear, chain stretch, and oil starvation risks before the first unit ever left Milwaukee. Management read those warnings, did the math, and greenlit production anyway. When those papers hit the light, owners saw their personal pride reflected in a lie. Every rider who had defended the Twin Cam suddenly questioned whether that rough, idle, and metallic chatter had ever been just character. What looked like a proud American machine now felt like a time bomb. The company that sold freedom had quietly sold fragility. Anger spread faster than oil from a blown gasket, and disbelief followed behind it. Harley's myth caught fire that night, and the smoke hasn't cleared since. Those papers weren't the whole fire. They only lit the fuse. The $23 decision. Inside those same files sat the number that defined betrayal, 23. That was how many dollars Harley saved on each bike by choosing a cheaper cam chain tensioner. Engineers had proposed stronger dual-chain designs and hydraulic options. Both passed durability tests. Both cost a little more. Management approved the weakest spring shoe system, knowing plastic would grind itself to dust under normal riding loads. On paper, the savings seemed small. Across hundreds of thousands of engines, it added millions to quarterly profits. The risk was written in the margins. Premature wear projected in less than 50,000 miles. Debris contamination likely, catastrophic failure possible. Owners never saw those projections. They saw marketing about revolutionary engineering and bulletproof reliability. Then they heard the rattle. It started as a soft ticking, rising with RPM, dismissed by dealers as normal Harley music. Yet every tick was a countdown. As the shoes wore down, shards of polymer flowed through oil passages, scratching bearings and starving lifters. Timing went erratic. Valves kissed pistons. Engines locked. Riders stranded on the side of the road called it bad luck. The memos called it expected wear. Greed had become engineering policy, and the bill landed in the hands of loyal customers who trusted the brand with their lives. That rattle riders heard was only the prelude. The silent failure came next. If this story shocked you, hit that like button and drop a comment below. Every rider's voice matters, and together, we'll make sure Harley can't bury the truth again. The oil pressure betrayal. If the tensioner was the ticking clock, the oil pump was the trap door. When it failed without sound. Long-distance touring riders discovered this the hard way. Cruising 70 miles an hour, gauges steady, until the needle dropped to 0 and the engine froze solid. Post-mortem teardowns revealed worn drive gears and scoring deep enough to kill pressure instantly. The leak files showed engineers had spotted the metallurgy issue early. The gears weren't hardened enough. Heat treatment varied from batch to batch. Average lifespan was estimated under 40,000 miles. The proposed fix, a redesigned gear and revised pump, cost $67 per unit. Executives rejected it as unnecessary expense. Those $67 became the difference between confidence and catastrophe. A seized motor on a bike weighing 800 pounds is not an inconvenience. It's a death sentence in traffic. Riders who survived began to watch oil gauges like heart monitors, terrified of a flicker. Others installed aftermarket pumps or preemptive rebuild kits, paying for the reliability they thought they had already bought. What cut deepest wasn't just the failure. It was knowing the company had calculated those odds and bet against its own riders. The silence of the oil pump was the sound of trust running dry. And even if you survived the silence, the next shock shook the whole bike. Before we keep going, take a second to check the links in the description. You'll find the same gear and accessories I use, tested, reliable, and built to last. The primary instability. Every Harley owner knows the feeling when a big twin throbs beneath them, the rhythm that's part heartbeat, part thunder. But on too many twin cam 88s, that pulse turned violent. Riders reported deep knocks inside the primary case, followed by harsh vibration that made handlebars blur. The culprit was the compensator assembly, a device meant to absorb power pulses and smooth engagement. Instead, it became the next weak link. Testing later showed that harmonic resonance at certain revolutions per minute caused premature wear and even cracking. Some units scattered metal through the case, shredding chains and puncturing covers. A few failures sprayed oil across rear tires at highway speed. Performance engineers called it an avoidable design flaw. The factory called it normal mechanical noise. That phrase, "they all do that," became a bitter joke among owners watching their drivetrain self-destruct. What riders learned was that instability wasn't just mechanical, it was cultural. The brand that once stood for steadfast reliability had started treating vibration as identity. Inside garages across America, men who once polished chrome with pride now pulled covers off engines with suspicion. Each bolt they loosened felt like opening an old wound. The compensator wasn't just failing, it was revealing the fracture line between Harley's myth and its machinery. If the engine was crumbling, the paper trail was already burning. Recall 095. The canary in the crankcase. The first real crack in Harley's armor came quietly. In the spring of 1999, just months after the twin cam 88's launch, Harley issued recall campaign 095. The official line blamed a cam sprocket bolt that might loosen and affect timing. To the public, it sounded minor, a precautionary adjustment, a quick dealer visit, nothing more. But behind that soft language, engineers were panicking. Internal documents revealed the recall's purpose was less about a bolt and more about what the bolt represented: instability deep inside the new engine's architecture. The cam bearing design was already showing premature wear. Early endurance tests had logged abnormal play in the shaft, metal flakes in oil samples, and measurable vibration increases long before warranty limits. Regulatory agencies recorded the recall as resolved, trusting Harley's documentation. Yet those inside the company knew the defect wasn't fixed, it was contained. Dealers were instructed to replace bolts, update paperwork, and reassure customers. No one was told to inspect the cam bearings themselves. That omission was deliberate. Replacing every bearing would have exposed the broader flaw, forcing a redesign and a public admission that the new flagship motor was unstable at its core. The recall was the smoke alarm that management smothered before anyone else could smell the fire. But after that first recall, the fixes moved underground. The service doctrine. By the early 2000s, Harley's public recalls had stopped, but internal service bulletins multiplied. These confidential memos guided dealers on how to manage failures without triggering formal action. Mechanics were told to log complaints as isolated incidents, replace only the affected parts, and never reference systemic issues in writing. The language was bureaucratic, almost surgical. Words like symptom, noise, and field observation replaced failure, design flaw, and recall. Each bulletin built another layer of insulation between the truth and the showroom. Dealership technicians found themselves trapped between conscience and policy. Many had grown up believing Harley stood for honesty and craftsmanship. Now they were being trained to sidestep responsibility. One former mechanic described it as working under a gag order with a wrench. He was told to smile at customers while quietly filing reports to Milwaukee that would vanish into archives. If too many identical failures appeared from the same region, the system flagged the dealer, not the part. The pressure was immense. Too many claims risked losing factory bonuses. Too few risked angry customers. Mechanics started swapping information privately, building their own shadow database to track recurring defects. Each service visit became part of a paper maze designed to bury patterns. Harley hadn't solved the problems, it had simply learned how to classify them into silence. When the factory stayed quiet, outsiders found their own voice, the aftermarket saviors. What Harley refused to repair, others perfected. As the cam chain and oil pump failures grew infamous, independent engineers stepped in to fill the void. Companies like S&S Cycle, Andrews Products, and Fueling Parts began releasing upgraded components that tackled the twin cam's weak points head-on. They hardened tensioner shoes, redesigned oil pumps for consistent pressure, and developed stronger compensators that tamed the engine's violent pulses. These weren't luxury upgrades, they were lifelines. Riders who once swore by factory parts now turned to the aftermarket for salvation. Independent shops across the country became havens for betrayed owners. Word spread from rally to rally. If you wanted your twin cam to survive, you replaced Harley's parts with theirs. Mechanics in small-town garages started keeping S&S kits in stock like medicine. They weren't chasing performance anymore. They were chasing reliability. It was an unspoken rebellion. Every modified motor represented a vote of no confidence in the motor company's promises. Ironically, these outsiders restored what Harley had lost: trust. Their products didn't need glossy marketing or nostalgia. They just worked. Riders left those shops feeling protected again, not by brand loyalty, but by human craftsmanship. The legend of Milwaukee Steel had been outsourced to the independents who cared more about integrity than quarterly profits. But while independents built trust, corporate lawyers built walls. Warranty warfare. When riders began demanding answers, Harley's defense wasn't mechanical. It was legal. Internal documents showed a strategy that treated warranties not as protection for customers, but as a firewall for the company. Claims were dissected for any reason to deny coverage. Service managers were coached to cite improper maintenance, unauthorized modifications, or excessive wear. Even when bikes were bone stock and serviced on schedule, denials flowed. The objective wasn't fairness, it was cost control. One memo outlined a target rejection rate of 43% for all warranty claims involving engine components. Every approval required extra justification, while denials could be logged with a single note. Riders began to notice the pattern. Some had their claims stalled until the warranty period expired. Others were asked for proof of every oil change receipt since purchase. A missed slip from a gas station service was enough to void coverage worth thousands. The experience drained even the most devoted owners. They weren't fighting just mechanical breakdowns. They were fighting paperwork designed to exhaust them. The company that once preached brotherhood had turned into an insurance adjuster with chrome handlebars. Riders started documenting everything, forming online archives of denied claims, sharing names of sympathetic dealers, and even pooling funds for legal action. The bureaucracy that was supposed to protect them became the proof of betrayal. Denied in the shop, riders began fighting back in the streets and forums. The value collapse. The market always tells the truth, even when corporations do not. When news of the twin Cam 88's failures spread, the numbers on the resale sheets fell like dominoes. Pre-2007 Harleys once cherished as investments began losing thousands overnight. Listings that used to move in days now sat for months. Collectors whispered warnings at auctions, and online boards filled with cautious buyers asking one question: is it one of the bad motors? For many owners, the answer was yes, and the impact was brutal. A Harley had never just been transportation. It was pride, status, and the promise of holding value like gold in the garage. Suddenly, that gold turned to tin. Owners who had poured savings into anniversary editions or customized cruisers watched their equity evaporate. Banks tightened lending for older models, and insurance underwriters quietly revised risk ratings. A mechanical defect had mutated into financial contagion. What stung most was that loyalty had no resale value. The motor company could rebrand or release new engines, but individual riders were left holding depreciating symbols of trust gone wrong. Each lost dollar became proof that reputation is its own currency, and Harley had spent too much of it. When prices crashed, the frontline dealers felt the shock next. Subscribe now because this is only the beginning. More Harley secrets are surfacing, and when the next one hits, you'll want to be first to see the evidence unfold. Dealers under siege. Dealers once stood as Harley's ambassadors, selling lifestyle as much as machinery. But when customers stopped buying and repairs turned into battles, that loyalty inverted. Service bays filled with angry riders demanding answers the factory would not give. Extended warranties became lifelines for dealers desperate to keep clients calm. Behind the counters, staff worked longer hours patching engines while corporate emails ordered them to stay on message. It was an impossible balance, fixing bikes without admitting the fault. Profit margins shrank as service costs rose. Parts once guaranteed to fit now came with caveats. Independent shops, free from factory oversight, began poaching Harley customers by promising transparency. Some dealers fought back with honesty, quietly recommending aftermarket solutions, even when it risked reprimand. Others clung to corporate lines and lost their base entirely. A few were hit with lawsuits from riders who claimed misrepresentation or denial of fair repair. The legal costs gutted them faster than declining sales. As margins thinned, some dealers tried turning community goodwill into survival strategy, hosting charity rides, transparency workshops, and open repair nights to rebuild trust. These small gestures couldn't erase corporate damage, but they reminded riders that passion still lived on the showroom floor, even if headquarters had forgotten it. The dealer network, once the beating heart of Harley's community, became the casualty of its corporate firewall. When trust died, foot traffic followed. Even inside the factory, some refused to stay silent. The engineers' rebellion. Not every Harley employee stayed loyal to silence. Deep inside test facilities and design departments, a few engineers refused to let history bury their warnings. They had predicted cam chain failures, oil pump seizures, and compensator fractures years earlier. When management dismissed them, they documented everything: lab reports, wear patterns, metallurgical analyses. These hidden archives would later confirm what riders already suspected: the failures weren't random, they were systemic. One test rider, known among peers for brutal honesty, logged 17 major engine failures during just 50,000 miles of evaluation. His findings read like a forecast of the next decade's service bulletins. For his trouble, he was labeled insubordinate and dismissed. Others followed him out the door, unwilling to attach their names to compromised engineering. Yet their defiance shaped the quiet reform that came later. By 2007, Harley adopted hydraulic tensioners and improved bearings, effectively acknowledging everything those rebels had said. The company never issued a confession, but the fix was its own kind of admission. Some of those dismissed engineers later resurfaced as consultants for rival brands, carrying their integrity where it would be respected. Their insight helped competitors avoid Harley's mistakes, proving that craftsmanship survives even when corporations forget its worth. In leaving, they preserved the very ideals the company had chosen to abandon. For the engineers who stayed, the victory was bittersweet. They had won the argument, but too late to save the brand's credibility. When the lab coats lost, the riders themselves took over. The parking lot union. The real repair shop became the parking lot. Riders who had been denied warranties or misled by dealers turned to each other for survival. Forums exploded with detailed guides, photos, and step-by-step tutorials on rebuilding twin cams the right way. Veterans shared part numbers and torque specs like secret currency. Weekend meetups turned into impromptu classrooms where owners taught each other to inspect cam shoes or swap oil pumps. What began as frustration evolved into a grassroots brotherhood stronger than any corporate network. Local clubs pooled tools, ordered aftermarket kits in bulk, and even created traveling mechanics to help stranded riders. In the digital age, that movement found its voice online. Thousands of members documented their rebuilds, posted failure photos, and warned newcomers. It wasn't rebellion for rebellion's sake, it was self-preservation. Through collective knowledge, riders reclaimed control over machines once weaponized against their wallets. They transformed shame into solidarity. Out of that movement came something even stronger than repairs: accountability. Riders began tracking serial numbers, documenting fixes, and exposing repeat offenders in public forums. Each post became a record of truth that Harley couldn't erase. Knowledge turned into currency, and transparency became the new badge of brotherhood among riders. The motor company had treated them as customers. They redefined themselves as caretakers of their own legacy. In that unity, they rebuilt not just engines, but the integrity the brand had lost. And their rebellion forced a reckoning far beyond the garage. Brand versus balance sheet. For decades, Harley-Davidson sold more than motorcycles. It sold mythology. Every ad, every rally, every glint of chrome promised that buying a Harley meant buying a piece of America. But when the twin-cam scandal broke, that story collided with the cold precision of corporate accounting. Inside boardrooms, heritage was no longer sacred. It was an asset to be leveraged, a line on the balance sheet. The same flag that fluttered in their commercials now flew over factories outsourcing parts from overseas suppliers. What had been marketed as made in America had quietly become managed for profit. Executives justified the change as survival. Competition was global, margins were thin, and shareholders demanded growth. Yet the price of that shift was cultural bankruptcy. Riders felt the betrayal first. Every corner cut in the name of efficiency chipped away at authenticity. When the leaked memos surfaced, the contradiction was undeniable. Harley's soul had been appraised, divided into cost centers, and sold to the highest bidder. The brand that once stood for rebellion had surrendered to the same corporate logic it used to defy. Shareholders applauded short-term gains, but longtime dealers and collectors saw the warning signs. Authenticity cannot be mass-produced or outsourced without cost. Every imported bolt and offshore casting diluted the story that built Harley's empire. What was once a movement of believers was becoming a marketplace of buyers and sellers. In the end, the numbers balanced, but the spirit didn't. Harley's strength on paper became weakness on the road, proof that no spreadsheet can measure trust. That same math hit the factory floor next. Labor draws the line. Inside the factories of Milwaukee and York, the sound of production once echoed like pride. Generations of craftsmen had built those engines with a sense of belonging, not just employment. But when news of the ignored defects reached the shop floor, that pride turned to unease. Workers whispered that management had known, that the failures weren't accidents, but calculated risks. Morale cracked like stressed steel. Union representatives began demanding explanations, not just about parts, but about values. For many employees, Harley wasn't a corporation, it was identity. Fathers and sons had welded frames, machined heads, and assembled motors side by side. They took the same rides on weekends that their labor made possible. To discover that their workmanship had been undermined by executive decision-making was a gut punch. Some quietly left for aerospace or defense manufacturing where their skills were respected. Others stayed, vowing to fight from within. A few small victories followed: stricter quality checks, more transparent supplier audits, and internal whistleblower protections. In break rooms and union halls, conversations turned from frustration to resolve. Workers began documenting every skipped inspection and shortcut procedure, creating their own quiet archive of accountability. It was no longer just about engines, it was about dignity. The factory floor had become the front line of Harley's moral reckoning. Still, the wound lingered. The workers had drawn their line, but management saw only bottom lines. The divide between pride and policy had become permanent, and every shift carried the weight of that betrayal. And while Milwaukee fought its ghosts, rivals prepared their attack. The competitors counterpunch. While Harley wrestled with its conscience, the rest of the motorcycle world went to war. Indian motorcycles returned with modern engines and rock-solid reliability, seizing the heritage mantle Harley had dropped. Across the Pacific, Chinese electric giant Build Your Dreams poured resources into affordable, efficient models that spoke to a new generation of riders. European brands fine-tuned performance, while American independents perfected aftermarket solutions. Together, they created a battlefield where loyalty alone was no longer enough. Consumers noticed. Riders who once swore they'd never stray from Harley began comparing warranty coverage, parts availability, and build quality. Indian offered torque without the tension or anxiety. BYD promised zero emissions and low maintenance. Even smaller brands pushed proof over promise as their selling point. Reliability became the new rebellion. Harley's former dominance had turned into vulnerability, and the twin-cam legacy cast a long shadow over every showroom. Harley's crisis also reshaped the aftermarket economy. Independent suppliers who once built fixes for survival now flourished globally. Their parts appeared on rival production lines, proving reliability could be engineered without betrayal. What began as patchwork repair shops evolved into a parallel industry, one built on transparency instead of tradition. For the first time in decades, Harley wasn't defining the market, it was defending its relevance. The legend of freedom on two wheels now belonged to whoever earned it next, and that battle was being fought one honest mile at a time. Now the question lands back in your garage, the rider's playbook. If Harley made its choice years ago, riders face theirs today. Owning a twin-cam 88 is no longer just about nostalgia, it's about responsibility. You can inspect, upgrade, document, or move on, but you can't ignore the truth. Start with vigilance. Check cam change shoes every 20,000 miles. Monitor oil pressure like your life depends on it, and invest in the upgrades the factory never gave you. Knowledge is armor. Every piece of information riders share online keeps another engine alive. For some, the answer is rebuilding, restoring what corporate neglect tried to erase. For others, it's selling the machine and choosing a brand that still earns trust. Either way, the decision is yours, not theirs. The power has shifted from Milwaukee boardrooms to the garages of ordinary people who refuse to be fooled twice. Freedom was never about chrome, it was about control. So when you roll that throttle and feel the pulse of your machine, remember the real lesson of the twin-cam scandal. Trust is the fuel that keeps any legacy running. Harley made a choice, and now so do you. Harley built a legacy on loyalty, but the truth behind the twin-cam 88 shattered that bond. The roar we loved now echoes with questions. Remember, freedom isn't bought, it's maintained. Keep riding, keep questioning, and never let chrome blind you to what's real beneath the tank.